So we were just talking about kind of your Uncle Lou's garage theory here. Now, you've said, I heard you actually the other day talking about guys who literally go online to Amazon and buy a black belt. And then they'll open up like some kind of jiu-jitsu school or something. There are guys out there who literally like are falsifying their credentials as far as...
Now there's been a lot of things online. I don't know if you've ever seen these videos where it's like fake black belt called out.
Yeah.
And like, it's almost cringeworthy and to watch. Like my brother has a weird thing where he's great under pressure. Like you could put him in an incredibly high pressure scenario in almost any aspect of life, whether it's like business sense, like with high stakes, personal confrontation, aggression. But the one thing that it just he can't handle is seeing other people embarrassed. He gets very physically uncomfortable and almost has to leave the room, stuff like that. So you'll see these videos where somebody who has trained, they've clearly got some degree of skill, but through injury, through lack of financial resources, through whatever excuse you could muster, they have failed to reach the milestone they wanted to of wearing a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And even though a black belt in jiu-jitsu doesn't mean anymore what it used to, it still has the highest regard of any accomplishment in martial art, because while someone can make their own system and say, to get a black belt under me, you have to train for 40 years, you have to do 1,000 push-ups, you can make a million different curriculums, you still can't match the actual fighting that a jiu-jitsu black belt at a legitimate school has to do. So it's the equivalent of, once you reach that point where you're getting the professor stripes and everything, it really is the closest thing to doctorate level, a PhD or whatever advanced degree in martial arts. So these people, they go online, they buy themselves a belt. People have been promoted. There's an old cliche in jiu-jitsu where a legitimate black belt is opening schools in America. He's doing really well, but he can't be at 4 schools at once. So he calls to Brazil. He has someone from his lineage come over, and they say on the plane ride over, not only do the time zones change, but the person goes from a purple belt to a black belt. And the person's so good and so skilled by being a legitimate purple belt that no one really, who's a new student would notice the difference. But it's false representation, and it really, over time, has an effect where it hurts the art. So I always tell our students, we have white belts in there that I could tell, they hand me their attendance card, and they're like, don't you, their eyes are saying, don't you say, when I want my, I tell them, you can go online right now. There's no requirement or documents to get any type of martial arts gear or paraphernalia. They sell, one of the sites is now selling a red belt, 9th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Grandmaster belt. And I think to myself, like, of the 38 people in the world at that rank currently living, are they offering this so like they can corner that market? Like what in the world is the thing? And it's not even like, a red belt, because other martial arts, use red belt. In my style of karate, red belt was actually right before black. It was in place of brown. So there is but this is a specifically marketed red belt, 9th degree. So it's really what it represents. And one of the people who I train with, who I actually just had come visit AMA and got some good training in with him yesterday, is he wears a black belt that the thing is a mess. It's a tattered, shredded mess. And in karate and other martial arts, when you see that, it's from the person washing it in the washing machine for 10 years. Eventually all the dye of the belt, the embroidery, everything falls apart. In jiu-jitsu, you're not supposed to wash the belts. It's the one part of the uniform you don't wash. And the belt in jiu-jitsu, from getting crushed and mangled and scraping and all the friction of the positions, eventually resembles something that no amount of washing machine and bleach could ever produce. And that's that's really special and unique, because it invokes the old-fashioned myth that a black belt in karate was just a white belt that went through enough dirt, enough blood. And that's a cool story, but the reality is no amount of brown dirt or red blood equals a solid black belt. It would just be a filthy, beige-ish orange mess of dirt and blood. But in jiu-jitsu, you'll see on some high-level guys who've been trained a really long time, that the belt is, getting deteriorated in conjunction with how much time on the mat they're really putting in.
Uh-huh.
And that's really special because everyone's, gis in jiu-jitsu now for a lot of people are more of a fashion statement. They want the latest gi. And I've treated myself, after becoming a head instructor to some cool, nice gis, and I can appreciate the cut and the coolness of it. But at the end of the day, this is a tool. If your gi that you've been wearing for 5 years looks more or less brand new, chances are it hasn't gone through the ringer, it hasn't had people pulling on it, trying to fling you around the room. It's more of a fashion accessory. So I think that's something you can really tell. If you always hear the expression in like blue collar working communities, if you shake someone's hand in a small town and the guy's hand feels like it's powdery soft, chances are he has, either through good fortune or just a life of ease, never really put in an honest day's work. He's never handled machinery. He's never had to go through some stuff that puts those calluses or stuff on that. It's the same with martial arts. The guy's super traditional but is in a hardcore style of karate, his knuckles should be pretty calloused and cut up with scars and stuff like that. But a lot of these guys, I see a lot of the traditional martial arts magazines have photo shoots. The guy's wearing, a brand new black belt that's cardboard stiff, it doesn't even tie, and his hand looks like he, worked in a jewelry store his whole life, which is okay. But to believe that he's going to take you on some journey that leads to actual fighting proficiency, I wouldn't have that high level of a confidence in that.
What is with the tradition of not washing your belt in jiu-jitsu?
Again, the myth behind it would be if you wash away the belt, you're washing away all your knowledge. What it really is because jiu-jitsu, and it's now moving away, and jiu-jitsu, like anything else, is getting watered down. The business end, the growth, the idea that there are so many students that would never stick around for authentic jiu-jitsu training.
Yeah.
You come in, you're on time. You're wearing a matching uniform. You're not trying to show off. You learn, 2 to 3 techniques. You drill them for serious repetition. You learn takedowns from the feet. You spar live. You go hard. People get submitted. A lot of that is getting watered away to more of a martial arts themed workout. You can, I've had people whose opinions I really respect tell me I got to accept that there are going to be people where their personal limitations, their anxieties, don't allow them to do that, but they should still be able to train jiu-jitsu, and if they put in the time, become black belts, which I obviously couldn't disagree with more. But that mentality has really changed things. So with back to what you asked about the belt, now it's everyone's like, well, I'm afraid of germs, I'm afraid of this, and of course you wash your uniform. You don't want to have any problems, and that's just part of good hygiene. But the belt, for that narrow strip of cloth, if it's not washed, it's going to give you an accurate idea of the person's time on the mat. If you go home and triple blast it, every time you train, you could have a belt that looks more worn than mine in, a year. And that's not, something where you want people saying, like, wow, this Will must be the biggest mat rat in town. His belt's, a shredded mess. Whereas the guy I train with on Friday, he's been a school owner. He's put in, over a decade on the mat, and he's had his gym successful for a long time, produced really good people. He deserves to wear a belt that looks like, it's been through a garbage compactor. So I like that aspect. I don't think that's, I always talk about the difference between, I could go down the street and find a tattoo shop and put, I've had a lot of fights on my arm in a tattoo, but if I have, let's say, hands or a face or something that looks like, wow, this guy's been through it. It's not that those things alone equal skill, but it's nice when there's some visual representation, and that can actually get you out of a lot of potential conflicts. When people size each other up, the standard is you see a guy with big biceps, you're intimidated, you think he must be strong. That might be a guy who goes to, Planet Fitness, curls in the squat rack, takes, a $200, beast stack supplement of powder, and his body and his genetics, his biceps get big. It doesn't really mean they're strong. It doesn't mean he'd be able to use strength
Yeah.
Effectively in a fight. But you see a guy with, a face like a catcher's mitt where his ears are mangled, his knuckles are covered in scars. That's usually a guy who isn't going to have a lot of people start trouble. And that's really, really good because that's probably, a guy who isn't looking for trouble, who just wants to be left alone. And I like the fact that there are certain things that anyone can purchase or acquire that can be visually intimidating, but then there's certain things that only come via experiences.
Yeah.
Like with the joke with my dad being afraid of all these professions. If you've ever shaken hands with someone who's been a longshoreman or a leather craftsman or some type of career where it's not any one monstrous amount of exertion, but it's thousands and thousands of repetitions of squeezing, pinching, twisting, those guys, their hands are stronger than anybody just from the weight room could get their hands. And that's something that you feel on the mat. One of our instructors has a grip that's like from another dimension, and people say, they go, do you do a lot of wrist curls, do you do a lot of this? And it's all from manual labor, physical tasks over many, many years.
Now I think that's smart, as far as you just said, the guy with the scarred up knuckles and the cauliflower ear or whatever, he's not actually usually the one looking for trouble.
Oh.
That's something that I've talked about in the past, and I've noticed as well from being in martial arts for 12 years or so, is that you'll have guys on the street and they'll bow up and the big bodybuilder types and screw you asshole, let's fight, whatever. But you've got, on the other hand, a martial artist like yourself who, you could cause some serious damage without really trying that hard. But you're, from what I understand, not the type of guy going out there and really looking for a fight. It's the last thing you want.
No, and I think a lot of people have a very romanticized version of what a fight would be. Like, even if you disregard modern society and legal ramifications and everything else, you should be thankful for the fact that we have a society where somebody that's bigger and stronger can't just come up with a Viking axe and chop you down and take all your stuff. You should be aware of the reality of self-defense, because even if I come from a really nice area, I never had to worry if I was walking down the mean streets of Milburn Avenue that somebody's going to really attack me. But you hear about tragedies at the Short Hills Mall. You hear about the reality of someone being robbed or a home invasion, so you want to be prepared. But people who've gone through the process that I was talking about a little bit ago of you get beaten up in sessions, you fail, you see what it really takes, they have such a respect for physical confrontation and violence that somebody looking at you at a bar or getting cut off in traffic, on what planet could that possibly be worth the physical risk, the legal risk, just your ego needing that? Just see him, will he back down? Most of it, what it really is that I've encountered and through people I know, is people want to feel dominant and they want to feel satisfied. If you and I, let's say you and I, Will, are two idiots who get into an altercation, we're both deep down hoping and praying for the conflict to end without anyone getting hurt, but so we both can have our friends tell us, you won, that guy's lucky, you didn't show him. And social contracts, which is something I believe in, are you're going out to Wild Wings to watch UFC, you're going out to a sporting event because you're under the assumption people are going to behave with basic common human decency. If every time I go out of the house I have to worry that somebody's going to get upset and get physically violent, that's a really crummy outlook and a lot of mental burden to have to go out. You stay home in that case. How are you going to meet new people? How are you going to be vulnerable and try new things when you have to worry about that? So I find that's absolutely true. People with the highest potential to do damage via training with their bare hands are usually less likely to be the ones involved. Now that's with a very important caveat. That's where I give the most credit and value to the traditional martial arts training, because unfortunately a lot of boxers, a lot of MMA people are super, super physically capable and dangerous fighting-wise, but have very poor behavioral control. Their philosophy and their ideology is either poor or it's very undeveloped. So imagine we get some young prospect who's a tough, physically strong guy. We tell him nothing but we want you to be good at beating up other people and hurting someone. You're not going to take that guy and convince him, okay, this is only for in the ring, this is this, if you don't make that stuff clear from the start. So you hear about UFC fighters and boxers and stuff getting into altercations at nightclubs and everything else. That's where I believe the mentality and the morals from traditional martial arts have their most important job. There's no argument to be made that the techniques of traditional martial arts are anywhere near as effective as the techniques of jiu-jitsu, MMA, and competition-based arts, because by definition they can't be. Those arts have to remove everything that can't work under 100% resistance against a trained person, whereas the other arts can keep everything as cultural artifacts. But I've never been to a jiu-jitsu class, I've never been to an MMA session where behavioral ethics of when this is appropriate or discussed. You know, it's adults aren't coming to have you retrain them in their 20s and 30s on social behavior. And there's something to be said for that, because nothing could get me to drop a student from the program quicker than finding out that, you know, this person goes and, you know, goes to areas and tries to start confrontations to test out their moves. And that happens.
Yeah.
That has happened. Famous people who have great reputations and are universally loved and respected have admitted that they did that when they were younger because they needed to see if something would work and test out. And that's really bad, because you can test those moves out on people that are prepared for it, that are trained, that are consenting. And yeah, there's something to be said for, well, I want to see what somebody would do for real in the streets. Then bring those people into the gym. Sign a quick waiver. And that's been done too. And the consent factor makes challenge matches okay. While it's raw and ugly to see somebody who for 10 years has thought that they were an unbelievably proficient hand-to-hand fighter get demolished by a 2-year jiu-jitsu student who's pinning them down and slapping their face while they're helpless. That's raw, it's visceral, but there's nothing morally bad about that. When both people agree to it, they sign away, they do it. But you can't do what happens sometimes, where people, you know, a couple guys from the jiu-jitsu program at some of these, you know, California schools or somewhere where it's, you know, a little more lax with the discipline, will go out to, you know, a sports bar or something and wait in the parking lot and try and start a verbal altercation with somebody and say, as long as the person gets aggressive to me first, I'm justified, you know, tying them into a knot and choking them out. That's reprehensible. That's, you know, misusing the martial art, I think.
It is. And that's something that people don't, I mean, especially in the MMA world. I know in Canada, I was training with a guy, Bill Wolf, and he was telling me, he's Canadian, he was telling me that over there, only the criminals really do MMA. Oh. Like, all the schools over there are run by gangs and stuff, which I thought was fascinating. But when you say it like that, it does make sense, because you don't get in boxing or MMA the discipline, the, you know, the, I guess you could say, Bushido, the warrior's code of how to act, how to behave, and look, these techniques. If you go out and break someone's arm with an arm bar on the streets, you're a fucking asshole for doing that if the guy didn't have a knife or wasn't trying to seriously hurt you or something.
I mean, I see no correlation between training super effective sport martial arts at full intensity and getting really good. I don't see that changing who a person is before they come to you. If you have a street mentality, if you're a person who just is an opportunist, you're just going to become a very, very physically dangerous opportunist, you know, thug type person, and thinking like, oh, this is awesome because the next frat party I'm at, now I'll know how to, like, you know, put my hand in someone's face and knock them out, because you know, somebody could come to a school like where I teach and say, let me learn from people who are really invested in teaching and making other people good, and then I'll go use that, and like the next time I run into my ex's new boyfriend, I've had people actually approach me and they say, I'm getting ready for like a fight with somebody I don't like I can't handle this person anymore. I've 2 or 3 times been close to blows with them, and now, and I say, like, listen, you could offer me double the rate of a private lesson, I'm not going to work with you. Not just because I think poorly of the idea, but because even if I was desperate and needed that money, it's only going to come back to haunt me and be bad for the school. I've had, at the first school I was at, I've had a father approach the school owner and asked if he can rent out the boxing ring to fist fight his 13-year-old son who's failing out of school, who's disrespectful, talking back at home, and he thinks this is his last option and he's gonna like beat some sense into his son, and he wants it to be like a fair fight.
Gosh damn.
Now, you're right. It's ridiculous to even say, and if I didn't see it, I almost wouldn't believe somebody could be that out of touch. But it's I think the best way to put it is I believe that the traditional martial art mentality, code of ethics, respect and discipline is phenomenal and perfectly applicable and not at all in opposition to the skills and technique and the way jiu-jitsu and MMA is trained. And I think it would be a huge positive for both sides, because people who want to have the strict discipline of lining up and being in uniform and the bowing and everything else that makes them feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves would only benefit more from being slowly introduced to the aliveness of full resistance training. And it doesn't have to be, okay, I'm completely cooperative, tomorrow it's 100% Thunderdome.
Right.
You build up to that. You know what I mean? You start with, okay, here's the move you've been learning. Now I'm going to move a little bit. You try and follow me and still make it work. Now I'm going to hold the pad, and I want you to actually hit full force, try and hit through the pad rather than stop just short of where you imagined.
Yeah.
And it could only be to the benefit. All these people in MMA that don't, and in jiu-jitsu, a lot of them don't feel they're connected to something. They feel like I'm only as good as my last match. My team lost at this IBJJF event, so now like I can't brag online until we win the next one. If they literally just kept their techniques, kept their training, but said, I'm going to show up on time instead of trying to miss warm-ups by showing up 10 minutes late. I'm going to wear a uniform that's a clean white gi that doesn't have, crazy, peacocking stuff all over it. I'm going to not talk when the instructor's talking. I'm going to listen. And I'm going to make sure, I shake everyone's hand at the end of class and I keep the profanity and the outside stuff off the mat. I think it would only be to their benefit. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, they would quit. I've had people quit because they don't like the direction and the effect on the culture that I have when I try and incorporate those things. And, you can't make everybody happy, but you have to be true to yourself. And when I was a student and I was brand new, who am I to rock the boat? I can only say this is how I'm going to approach it. And certain people will agree with me, certain people won't. But there was a lot of stuff that I had to kind of remove and filter out that I just saw it's not even neutral. Like it actually is having a negative effect. And I kept the stuff from the different instructors I've had that I thought was good. I've tried to make it kind of a selection of the best. Like, buffet style is usually used in a negative manner, but in terms of offering people the best different aspects while bringing it together and removing the stuff that I felt, held me back is so far, I'm really happy with the results.
I mean, it speaks volumes about your awareness, because it's like, I do a lot of Jeet Kune Do. Bruce Lee said, reject what is useless, take what is useful, and add what is uniquely your own.
Okay.
And I really think that is kind of the essence of martial arts. And by you saying, look, I take what works, because if you look at original Japanese jiu-jitsu, not the, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but the original stuff, judo, this was all, you bow before class, you show respect to your teacher, you show respect to your fellow students in your training hall and all that. It's very disciplined, very cultured.
Yeah.
And for us to be able to take Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kind of add more of that, traditionality to it, if you will, it's brilliant, man. I think it works.
I feel a genuine, and again, I don't mean to come off as in any way condescending, because I'm only where I am and able to have the perspective, because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants who went through tons of resistance and opposition and everything to change the way martial arts was. But there are tons of people from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu who have unbelievable knowledge that have never gotten to actually use the techniques, not even use them. Like people say, look, I want to use it to hurt somebody. I never got to use it in the street. They've never been able to improve their techniques by doing them in a realistic or a live manner. It's been all coordinated. I mean, you could twist my wrist and I could, in a cooperative class setting, throw myself to the floor, and you say, okay, if you didn't throw yourself to the floor, I would have broken your wrist. But you'd be so shocked to see the difference when somebody just pulls away or somebody comes forward or does something that doesn't follow the protocol. it's horrifying to feel that difference. So again, I feel like people in traditional arts can completely keep what they've achieved and keep their connection, and could really, really benefit without, a sky high injury rating. It's not like, okay, fencers should take off the protective gear and put a razor sharp tip, and every fencing class somebody gets killed. It's not like that at all. It's saying, imagine if fencers didn't actually have the swords make contact and they simply came close. There'd be totally different styles, moves that would work. A game of I almost touched you is very different than I ran you through with a saber. It's completely different. And I think that what gives jiu-jitsu and MMA such an allure for people is somebody who's swamped with work, doesn't have very little time, can blow off so much steam and get such a positive release and be a better worker, a better husband, a better father, just a better man, if they're able to have the process of breaking down and rebuilding together in a group. And you can help someone that's brand new, that you've already gone through some of the growing pains, and help them. You can look up to someone who isn't, necessarily 10 times better than you, but who's maybe 1 or 2 belts ahead. I still go back to the guys who were already pretty experienced when I started, like the guys who were already purple belts. And back then, a purple belt was a big deal. If there were only 4 black belts in the state of New Jersey and you were hours away from one, somebody who had a purple belt to you was like you would listen to whatever they told you, because they didn't get that belt for hanging around for a year. They put in years and years and went through tough stuff. And I think it's great that we have at AMA such a good support group. For somebody to come to AMA, give it their best, and get just discouraged to the point where they quit, I can confidently say it's not anything that I think the program could have done to accommodate them more. It's just the unfortunate reality is jiu-jitsu isn't for everyone. If you've ever seen these programs with boxing or these programs with other stuff, you can water something down to the point where you can say, Will, you can come to a boxing class for 10 years, you'll never get hit in the face once. You're going to be shadow boxing. Someone's going to hold the mitts for you. You can get a good workout. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I've seen people lose, 75 pounds in a cardio kickboxing program. But that person can't be led to believe that this is combat training. And then they start joking like, hey, you better not say anything to me because I've been doing, I love kickboxing for 10 years. You have to understand things for what they are. I've gone with my father to recreationally do trap shooting. And shoot shotguns at clay targets. It's a blast. My dad's way, way better than I am. It's something we can share together. Under no circumstances would I ever present myself or allow myself to believe that I have, combative shotgun training and I'd be ready for, a home invasion or doing, Terminator 2 Arnold, flipping the thing over. And you gotta understand, if that's what I want to achieve, I have to do what's uncomfortable, and I have to have a closed course where things are going to be popping out and the lights are going to be going, and I'm going to be stressed out of my mind. I'm going to wind up missing a target by 5 feet, and eventually I'll grind it out and improve, and then it'll be so rewarding when I can show that proficiency. And people don't want that. They want to go from A to Z and cut out the 20-something other letters to get there.
People want what's easy. Of course, and it's like you said, everyone's always kind of jonesing for that next quick fix or whatever. But when it comes to something like martial arts, as we've been talking about, it's not a quick fix. It's something you got to earn, just like everything else.
Instant gratification is so, I think, out of control today, and I've had to really take a look in the mirror and say, do I want to be the type of person where I'm getting agitated and frustrated waiting 2 minutes for a breakfast burrito in the microwave that I need to, lunge for my phone and refresh a feed. It's very easy, and you see it with kids too. I mean, I've seen, in the couple decades since I was a kid, I've seen changes in just the general population where people I know and respect literally cannot control their kids to the point where if they do not have electronic entertainment for their kid, or if they are not fully giving them unlimited attention, their kid is leaning over, knocking things off a desk, running into and hitting other adults or causing. that is so bad. No matter how much you want to say, well, we have such a good relationship and I'm my child's friend. I mean, my parents weren't super strict at all when it came to discipline, but when they sent us to a Korean karate program that was run authentically, when they snapped that Shinai bamboo stick and when they yelled instructions, you were like a little bit afraid. And it wasn't child abuse. It wasn't, crushing your tender spirit. It was, there are things in life where if you don't learn early on to control your behavior and have that willpower, you're going to really be on a path in life that's going to be very limited, and you're going to have problems in school, problems in your professional life, problems in relationships, because you've never sharpened the blade of self-control. And I mean, it's really bad, I think, that people will say, listen, if you don't give little Billy his blue belt within 6 months, I'll pull him and take him to another school that will.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when I go back to, why don't we just cut to the chase and get little Billy the Grandmaster belt? Because if you just want this to put on his college application, Eagle Scout, third chair violin, black belt in this, you can have that. You should want that because of the benefit to little Billy's life.
Yeah.
You should want him to hear no and realize he doesn't get a first place trophy just for showing up. There are going to be other kids that worked a little harder or a little more talented. And I think the best mentality is you want to have an equal opportunity for people. You want to have everyone be able to be the best they can be. But there are going to be unequal results in life. That's not a bad thing. Everybody isn't cut out to be a brain surgeon. Everyone isn't cut out to be a amazing musician that has those gifts. And some people with martial arts, their top cap to the level they're going to reach might be nowhere near as high as someone else, but that's still awesome for them to experience that growth, and it's only better for them. I have areas where just even we joked getting here today. I'm glad that I have my GPS and everything else, because spatial mapping, distance, recognizing roads, everything, it's just never been one of my strong suits. But I'm thankful that other things I do have a good knack for, and I'm able to really make the most of.
It's funny you say that. I suck at navigating. It's one of the things I'm most terrible at. But I do have other strengths. So everyone's got their strengths and their weaknesses. When it comes to fighting, I think it's so important to realize that not everyone's freaking Rambo. Not everyone's capable of doing all these things. So that when you do, Lord forbid, get into an altercation, whether it's whatever the case, on the streets or whatever have you, and you need to actually preserve your own life, that you don't have that false sense of security. Well, I've thrown, a million backwards spinning, foot kicks or whatever, so I can do this. Look, everyone's got their own body build, their own type, their own... I've trained with state troopers and stuff who... you would think by looking at them and by their background and whatever, but when it comes down to it, should they get involved in something without their weapon, it would be another story. So
I actually did several law enforcement seminars the past year, and I have such respect for all the people that are involved in law enforcement. I have great relationships, but I joke with them because we have such a good relationship that the only thing lower on the conditioning cardio tier than somebody who's never trained is cop cardio. I bring them in and we do seminars, and I have to really really clap my hands, raise my voice, get them to want to get serious. And then when we do, just via cooperative drilling, I don't even do live sparring at these seminars, via cooperative drilling, there's always 2-3 people out of the group that have to physically stop and go sit down, that are getting blurred vision, nauseous from literally simple, okay, here's an arrest and cuff scenario, here's a scenario where someone, it's not like I'm having them run and do burpees and anything like that. And it's unfortunate because while I know I don't have any idea what it's like to be on the job and have to deal with the worst society has to offer, I know that in no way can they be putting themselves in the best position to go home safely and be effective at their job if they, due to busyness and just the nature of the job, get in zero amounts of physical training. I mean, besides doing the push-up, the jog test, everything, there's a minimal hand-to-hand training, and it's done maybe once a year. They have a company like Safari or somebody come in, do a few, guys running at you with a bat, you're going to flip them these scenarios, and believe me, it's better than nothing. But to know that I mean, the number of people that think it's within their rights to resist arrest and flip out, and they got their friend videotaping them and everything, police do not have the ability to assume most people are going to cooperate. So to know that you have this super, super short little bar of energy available as an officer, and that if somebody resists, you are going to have a full-blown panic attack. If your backup doesn't get there in time, you're going to be overwhelmed. It's frightening, and it's also sad because it is preventable. It's not like they need to do 10 CrossFit workouts a week, but basic training in jiu-jitsu and in resisting non-cooperative martial arts is so beneficial. And the officers that embrace it, I have 2 officers that are my regular students. They're both 150 pounds tops. They can go full blast from standing at full resistance. They can do 3 5-minute rounds easily, which might not sound like a lot to somebody who hasn't sparred in that way, but that is very, very tough for someone who has a full-time career and is not, a high-level athlete. And the people that are resisting arrest are as tight as a board. They are spending energy like they're going to the electric chair, and you do not have to fight them for 15 minutes. 30 seconds to a minute is above and beyond what a lot of people have in them to resist at anything resembling, a powerful amount of force. And most officers that aren't doing some type of training like we're talking about don't have that, So I do the seminars. I hope that there's a benefit because I put a lot of time and energy into planning the curriculum, into really making sure that I show them the respect that they deserve, while also trying to hammer home just how important it really is to take this seriously and not treat it as, this is kind of a day off, the department's making me do it. It's not that important. But I really think that there's no better benefit for someone who is doing a full 25-year, whatever the average career length to retirement is for law enforcement, to investing in something that next to your cuffs and your weapon is the most powerful thing to have on you. And you take it with you every day, the understanding of this is how I can restrain someone, this is how I can bring them to the ground, this is what I can do to avoid some of these tragedies you see where someone who doesn't understand what a chokehold is, what a windpipe tracheal compression is versus what carotid artery compression is, and then you have these tragic scenarios where an officer is affected for the rest of his life. It's really avoidable, but it's not easy. Like you said, it's outside of most people's comfort zones, which is a super narrow range for the average person. I mean, mine certainly was when I started.
I think, you're absolutely right about that. There's an old joke I heard once that cops don't train unless they're being paid for it. But with that aside, I really think that, like you were saying, it's so valuable for law enforcement guys, even security guys who have to do this stuff and have to be able to restrain somebody with cameras and everyone on their cell phones and all these news cases. You can't be too careful.
No.
And for you to invest in something that would actually show you the proper application and you can prove that in court, well, hey, I had training on this and this is why I did this.
It's almost a little kind of reckless and irresponsible not to, because it's not like the jury's out and let somebody else test it out and I'll come back to it. I mean, I could give you testimonials from the 20 plus officers that I work with that say they're so much more confident on anything, but I have had a few where they get demoralized and they have a person that's half their size, manhandling them, not even with technical, jiu-jitsu moves that the general public wouldn't know, but just a guy who's as new as they are, who physically has a little bit better body awareness and coordination, or his ability to transfer force is better. I've had officers actually quit and go to other schools because they're not reaching the progress they thought they would, and their solution is, let me go somewhere where it's easy and they'll ask less of me. That's bad if it's a general hobbyist. That's terribly short-sighted. If it's someone whose life could ultimately depend on it, it's not like every day on the job for an officer is, a Dirty Harry shootout or a hand-to-hand brawl. But you can't assume you're going to retire having never drawn your weapon, having never had somebody grab you in a headlock or try and, reach for your weapon, or all these crazy things that happen. It's sad, but I know that could very easily be me. Had things in my life gone on a different path, I could very easily be the guy sitting here to you being like, yeah, well, I know you're doing this jiu-jitsu and MMA stuff, but right now I have my 6th-degree black belt in karate, one of the youngest ever in the world, and yeah, every fight goes to the ground, but standing up, you really think you're going to get past my hook kick? I could easily have kept that mindset if certain things hadn't played out the way they did. And it's nothing to do with somebody having a bad attitude usually, or they have bad intentions, or they're trying to stop progress in martial arts. It's just, the pool you swim in might be very different than the pool I've swam in, and we're all shaped by our experiences. I just think that you owe it to yourself to invest in martial arts. You owe it to yourself to really see what happens when we take away my rules, your rules, and we see what happens in the universal application of human combat, And there's a whole group of people on the law enforcement side that say, psh, take your arm bar, well, whatever. I'm just going to draw my weapon and I'll put you down before you get within 20 feet. And that might be true for maybe a home invasion, but in regular society, you can't just, execute people because they act a little physically aggressive towards you. So having proficiency in hand-to-hand combat doesn't replace weapons. It doesn't, punching and kicking doesn't beat a gun. But it really is something that is rewarding to have confidence that, what? Anybody who isn't a super highly trained professional fighter, I have the confidence that I could easily handle an altercation with them. That is a very unique thing that really money can't buy, because it lets you go into scenarios where you might otherwise feel very vulnerable, or where you might think I don't feel I can protect my wife, my kid. And you say, you know what, I hope nothing happens, but if it did happen, I can't imagine that whoever would be showing this aggression and violence towards me is going to be prepared for what I bring to the table.
Yeah.
That's invaluable. I encourage people to spend the time, go through the bumps and bruises, and get to that point, because you can never regret having that.
Absolutely not. I was watching an interview with a Marine Corps commandant or colonel or something once, and he was talking about their McMAP hand-to-hand program. He was saying, we don't train our Marines to go hand-to-hand because we think that we're going to go into Afghanistan with bayonets and, beat our enemies with karate moves.
Sure.
But we train our Marines in hand-to-hand combat to give them the desire, confidence, and ability to close with and kill the enemy.
Yeah, and weapons, I mean, I made the joke earlier about the Glock, but weapons jam, people get disarmed, people run out of ammo, and it can never be a bad thing to have that confidence. No military person is going to abandon their weapons and challenge each other to Marquis of Queensberry rules.
I hope not.
But there's almost always a crutch, I find, Will, an excuse or a rationalization for people to not develop the hand-to-hand skills. They want to say, well, I am going to rely on my weapon, or I do something, I have, on the extreme cartoon level, I have, chi blast powers or other stuff, because it's very difficult and demoralizing to go through the process. I remember I have a training partner who's been training with him since I was 21 and he was 18, who's a Division I wrestler. He's taller than I am. He's a big physical guy, and as a wrestler, a lot of my best options just did not work at all against him. And even from when he started, and I had already been training for, a couple of years, right from the get-go, he was, breaking even with me when we'd fight each other, and oftentimes getting the better of it. And my go-to from the traditional karate mindset was, he's not doing the right moves. He's cheating. If this was real to the death, I'd still...
Right.
It was all a crutch. It was all a way for me to say, I can't accept reality. I can kind of poison the well and change why it's happening instead of facing the obvious. And that process for a lot of people is too much. Whether it's somebody younger than them, bigger, heavier, the wrestler mold is usually a big dream killer for a lot of martial artists. And what you should say is, this is really good that I have such a tier of progress of challenge. If you imagine playing a video game, you can select easy, medium, hard difficulty tiers to work against. You have that challenge, because if you ever get to the point where you are the best person at your school and the rounds are effortless and you could beat the second best and all the other people with your eyes closed, you'd think it'd be awesome, you'd think it'd be an accomplishment. It's actually, when people reach that point, very discouraging. It kills their motivation. They often stop training as much, they get out of shape, they just they get very complacent. So don't get me wrong, if you become the number one person in your division in the UFC, that's a good situation, because you're going to have really hungry people coming up after you.
Yeah.
But if you're only training with, okay, I have a group of 10 guys, they train at my school, I'm the best guy there, you need to, once a week, make a pilgrimage to another school that has new challenges. You need to bring people in. What I'm doing now, because my schedule doesn't give me the freedom to really travel as much anymore. Like, I've trained at, a couple dozen gyms over the years, even just counting ones that I visited a handful of times. Now my travel options are a little more restricted due to time, but I'll have really generous open door policies of inviting people to come over. I'll let people come over and say, hey, listen, if you're willing to give me full blast 100% rounds of fighting, you can also bring your students and they can stay and take one of my classes.
Oh, nice.
Stuff like that. So I try and offer something more than just like, hey, I want more partners to come here. Which, don't get me wrong, like, I hope they're getting something out of it too, but I want to go over the top and make it such a one-sided offer. They almost are willing to accept the inconvenience, even if they otherwise would be like, do I really want to drive out to see Helwig? They'll come in because they know it's going to benefit them. It's going to be a boost for their program. And I think that's important, because if you don't have that and it just becomes, our gang versus your gang, it was like that for a while. We have secret techniques I don't want you to see. When I went to the Renzo Gracie gym, which is who we trace our lineage through, because my instructor is one of the earlier American black belts under Renzo in Manhattan, I was asking a lot of questions. I was like, how often am I going to get to go here? I really want to pick their brains. And one of their iconic signature techniques was the arm-in guillotine. Almost all guillotines in MMA and in no-gi had been done with just the person's neck. From Ken Shamrock hitting it on Dan Severn to, even present day, the gross majority of guillotines are done that way. And I know Renzo himself had used the arm and guillotine effectively in some of his fights in Pride, and also his students were able to do it in competition. But it doesn't function just like a regular guillotine, and I had tried it and it didn't come close to working. So I asked them, and they were, they were able to show me, but they really wanted to be like, wait a minute, I thought you were with this other gym. Like, are you now with, AMA under a Renzo guy? Like, we don't want this getting out into the general knowledge. And I can appreciate that, because they worked hard on it. It's something that's it's an arrow in their quiver, so to speak. But if you get too stingy and too into that mindset, overall fighting suffers. Overall martial arts stays stagnant. And you should want to be at the point where you say, I'm going to release an instructional. Here's the new will variation of this move. You guys train it. Like, I dare you to try and stop it. And then you'll have to get better if they get better at dealing with it. And it reaches the point where, how people set up arm bars now is a little bit different in most cases. The whole leg lock game's been turned on its head. And it doesn't happen just gradually over time. Everybody gets a little better. There are huge leaps and huge innovations made by tiny little handfuls of people, and it's because they're willing to put in the time, they're willing to take risks. And if it works in competition at 100% with money on the line and ego and reputation, you better believe it can work, life and death on the street. So it's really good to know that you can train techniques, you can build them up, do them at full resistance, let somebody really try to escape, and then say, you know what, I have confidence that this is going to work now. Whereas a lot of times people have confidence, but it's a false confidence because it's something they've practiced a million times. Like, a lot more about, firearms and weapons than I do, but I could, in my bedroom, take the Glock pistol I keep bringing up and I could twirl it, throw it up, catch it, click, click, and it's empty, does that really mean if somebody tried to mug me on a train, that would happen the way it happened in my room when I can do 100 bad reps to get it to click once cool? Is that reliable? No. But if we do scenarios where you come out with a gun filled with blanks and we use the real Glocks, we do everything, you could simulate that in practice going full blast 100 times, and I could say, wow, I'm not even close on any of them. This really isn't going to work if I needed it. And people just tend to, from my experience, not want to do that. They want to do what lets them go home and say, you should have seen how awesome I was. You know, I had the guy flying around the room. But when it was his turn, well, he had you flying around the room because you're letting each other do it.
Yeah.
They do what we do, cooperative drilling, but then they never take it any bit further.
Yeah.
So it begins and ends there. And that's a recipe, I think, for disappointment.
It's the old bodybuilding concept of one good rep is better than 10 bad reps.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. You can see people in the gym grunting doing these half reps. And there's something to be said at a very high level. If you've been bodybuilding for 10 years, you're going to reach plateaus where cheat reps, force negative, drop sets, these advanced tactics that might look kind of questionable are going to come into play. Mm-hmm. But when it's the guy I'm talking about at a Planet Fitness, you know, in jeans and a wife beater curling in the squat rack, he wants to say he's curling, you know, 185 pounds when he couldn't barely curl with correct form, maybe 90 pounds.
Yeah.
But he's, you know, using his hips, his legs, he's forcing, he's bouncing the weight. It's tough because I did many years of weight training, and I had to learn it from scratch. I didn't have very good guidance. I had a couple people give me really good guidelines, but the first several years were just me buying those, you know, 300-page muscle and fitness magazines where half of it's ads. And every single bodybuilder gives the same made-up routine. Oh yeah, I do 3 sets of 10. Mondays chest and triceps. Yeah. Tuesday, Wednesdays back and biceps, and Fridays leg day if I get to it. And that's just like, you know, that doesn't lead to anything other than what they, I think, determined scientifically after many years was you're actually just increasing the space, the fluid, and the expansion between muscle fibers versus actually building denser, stronger muscle fibers when you do kind of a largely fluff routine like that. Yeah. So it looks impressive. You absolutely get stronger than if you weren't lifting at all. But those guys, you know, I can't tell you the number of people who have super impressive physiques, and when I grab a hold of them, it feels like a little kid. You know, they have no ability to use that increase in size to actually accomplish anything. It's done in isolation. It's done with super long amounts of rest in between that don't exist in any time of fighting. That gets back to, I think you've probably heard me say about, like, there are no secrets that we have at our school that other schools don't, but if there was one, it's the limited rest, the timing of your rest. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think anybody could come up with a scenario where you're going to have a street self-defense situation, a competition setting, anything, where you're going to have, you know, some exertion during combat, and then you're going to have, you know, 3 to 5 minutes to hang out, tie your shoes, get a drink, come back. And those long periods of rest are actually important for bodybuilding, for powerlifting, for certain aspects, but they have no place whatsoever for a combat scenario or a combat athlete training. So what we do is the longest we'll ever rest is going to be 1 minute.
Yeah.
And if you can adapt that into your strength and conditioning, for many years, my rest periods were less than a minute. So while I couldn't move around crazy, you know, numbers that some other people could, I could move around pretty respectable numbers, rest for a tiny bit, move that same number again, and do many sets of it. So what I found out that was called is power endurance. You're training at, you know, 80+% of your 1 rep max, but you're resting for a very little period in between. So somebody might, for example, do, you know, I'll put 285 pounds on a bar and whatever exercise. For some people that might be their bench press, some people that might be their deadlift. You put 285 on the bar, you only do 2 reps of the exercise, but 30 seconds later you do 2 more. And after 10 sets in a row of that of only 30 seconds rest, your central nervous system is fried. You're like in a zone where you need to be supremely concentrated. But when you go to fight somebody, that transfers incredibly well into you being able to keep going and keep being strong even after the fight wears on. Because if you think about it, what fighting scenario would you be using very, very little effort for a lot of repetitions with a good amount of rest to do it again?
Right, right.
You'd never shoot a half-hearted takedown 25 times in a row or throw 25 pitter-patter punches and look busy, but somebody will be like, wow, I did 50 reps on, tricep kickbacks and I felt the burn. There really is no transfer on that. It'll have your arms looking good for the beach, which is what a lot of people want, even if they don't admit it. But the people that train in a way that really transfers to fighting, they do the stuff that's uncomfortable. It has the staff at the gym looking at you like, come on. You're hogging. I've had the Can-Do of Short Hills.
Yeah.
Actually, while they didn't officially kick me out, they made it clear that they were going to restrict what I was able to do in an attempt to get me to leave, but then didn't want to let me out of the contract because, people who wanted to do kicky feet on the ball or stand around were complaining that I was doing this format, and that's what I signed up to do. I wasn't like trying to draw attention to myself or intrude on anyone else, but I was getting ready for a huge fight at the time in Atlantic City, and my opponent was a serious character, and I couldn't sacrifice the training I knew that would put me in the best position to win just to be, the guy who goes with the grain and doesn't have people, give him a weird look or something. So you do what's necessary.